Alright, let's create a game. It's going to be called Rubik's Slider. It's going to be a sliding puzzle game where you can slide the pieces around and try to match a puzzle on the left. So it's going to be simple. So we'll just get started right now. So HTML, head, title will be Rubik's Slider. So this is based off of a game that actually exists in real life. So let's get some styling done since I know what I want as far as styling. So we'll have a padding 0, margin 0, box sizing, border, box. This will make everything stay the size that we tell it to be. Our body, we will have a background of light gray, and we'll have some classes. One will be a game board, and the other will be a cell. Both of them will have a position absolute. Our cell, we will default have a border of 1 pixel solid black, and then we will have a player board, and that will be positioned top 50%, left 50%, and translate negative 50% by negative 50%. That will center it on the screen. That's it for styling. Come on. That's it for styling. That's it for our header, our head. Then we'll go into our body. In the body, we will have some divs. One will be the timer, which is that we're going to time ourselves. The other will be the player board, and it'll have a class of game board. And then we'll have another one very similar. This will be pattern board, and it'll have a class of game board as well. That's everything for our body. Let's close out the HTML. Let's script it inside here as well. So let's scroll up a little bit. First thing we have is a class called cell. Class cell. It's going to have a constructor, and that's going to take a render grid, which will create that class in a second, an X position, a Y position, and then what color it's going to be. This dot grid is equal to RG, this dot X is equal to X, this dot Y is equal to Y, and this dot color is equal to the color. We'll have a render function, which will actually just say this dot grid. It'll call a method within the render grid class called fill cell, and we'll pass ourselves in there. So now we can create the render grid class that we were referring to. So class render grid, and that's going to have a constructor, and it's going to take a grid size, a cell size, and a parent element. So this dot grid size is equal to grid size, this dot cell size is equal to cell size, and this dot parent is equal to parent. We'll also have a grid array here, and that'll be equal to a blank grid to start, and then we'll say this dot build grid. This will be a method that we create now, build grid. In it we will have a for loop here. For let x equal 0, x is less than this dot grid size, and x plus plus. For let y equal 0, y is less than this dot grid size as well, and then y plus plus. So one thing we need to do is set this dot grid at the index of x equal to a blank array so that we can start populating the array within that index. So inside of here we'll say if this dot grid x y, oh actually this is where we create our DOM element, sorry. So we'll let DOM equal document dot create element, and then we'll create a div. DOM dot set attribute class, we'll give it class of cell. Oops, I don't know why I do that there. Then dom.style.width is equal to dom.style.height is equal to this dot cell size plus pixels at the end. Px, there we go. Dom.style.left is equal to this dot cell size times x, and we'll put pixels at the end of this as well. Px, px. Copy that, paste it, change it from x to y, from left to top. Finally, we will say this dot parent dot append child dom, and this dot grid at x and y will be equal to a blank object with a DOM attribute set to the DOM element we created and a color attribute defaulted to false. This is our build grid. The next thing we want to create is that method we used in the cell class called fill cell. This will take a cell and we will just say if this dot grid at x and this dot grid, oh, and by x I mean cell.x, cell.x at cell.x and cell.y, then we can just set grid at cell.x and cell.y color equal to the cell.color. Alright, so lastly in here after the fill cell we will say render, and we will copy this right here and just paste it in there, and we will remove this because we don't need that there, and we will render from here. Come on. Okay. And so inside of the render method we will just do some checks. We'll say if this dot grid x y dot color is not equal to false, we will say this dot grid x y dot dom dot style dot background is equal to, and this dot grid at x y dot color. Simple enough. Then else, if it is false, this dot grid at x y dot dom dot style dot background will be equal to none. And then regardless, at the end of this code we want to reset the color attribute to false. That means that we have to continually loop filling in cells and then re-rendering it. If we render and didn't fill a cell, then it defaults back to false and doesn't render a color at all. Next thing we need to do is create the game board. So this needs to come above the render grid. So game board, class game board, and it's going to have a constructor as well. It's just going to take a render grid. And we'll say this dot grid is equal to render grid, this dot cells is equal to a blank array, and then this dot build game board will be a method that we run. We'll create that now, build game board, and in here we're going to do a few things because this is actually what we use to create the random board with the random colors in different spots. So we'll let colors equal a list of colors. So we'll have this color, we'll have this color, and we're just going to throw some colors in here. And let's actually start with white. There, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors. That should be good. Next we'll have another variable called AP, or all pieces, and that's going to be a blank array, and we're going to start filling this array with all the possible pieces in the grid. How we do that, we say for let color index equals 0, color index is less than this grid size plus 1, because we're going to have always one more color than we have rows, and we'll have one less of each color than we have rows. So we'll have, in this case, if we have 4 rows, we'll have 5 colors with 3 of each color. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. CI plus plus, inside of here we'll say for let each index, so each color index equals 0, and then each index is less than this grid size minus 1, like I said, and then EI plus plus. And then here we'll push colors at the index of CI in there. There we go. Finally, after the for loop, we're going to say ap.push false. So we're going to have one cell that's created that is just blank without any color. Under here, we will loop through. So we'll say for let x equals 0. X is less than this grid size x plus plus, and then for let y equals 0. Y is less than this grid size, and then x plus, or sorry, y plus plus. We need to do the same thing with cells. This cells at the index of x is going to equal to a blank array, just like we did in the render grid. Now in here we can say let color index be equal to math.random times the all pieces.length, and then we'll floor that, and then we'll say this cells x y is equal to a new cell. This grid will be the render grid, x position and y position, and then AP, so all pieces at the color index that we have. You know what, let's change color index to piece index, because that's really what it is. Piece index. And piece index. There we go. Because really it's just the index of pieces, not necessarily a specific color. Then we can check if AP at piece index is equal to false, then we know that this is an empty cell. So we'll say this empty is equal to this cells x y. Now we can come up here and add this empty, set it equal to a blank object just to start. So now we're setting the empty piece. Then finally we will splice from our all pieces array the piece index, so that we don't reuse that piece, because if it's out of the array we won't have to use it again. Alright, next thing we have is a method called getEmptyCell, and this will return that empty cell. So we'll just return this empty, and then we will have a render method for our game board as well, and this is very much the same as everything else. We'll come here, copy this, come in here, paste it, remove this line, and it's just this cells x y render. There we are. So that's the render method. That's it for our classes. Now we can start building the functionality. So we can come down here. Let's set some variables. So settings, setting variables. We'll say let difficulty equal 5, and let win equal false. So let's do some timer specific variables. So let timer dom be equal to document.getElement by ID, and we're going to get that timer. And then we need some things to keep track of time. We need a last time. Set that equal to 0. We need a timer itself. We need the delta time, or the times between each interval. Set that equal to 0. Let minutes equal 0, and let seconds equal 0. Okay, so we're good for there. Now let's do the player. Player will have the player board, which will be equal to document.getElement by ID player board. Then we'll create the render grid. Render grid is equal to a new render grid, and that is the difficulty will be how wide and tall it is, and then the pieces will be 50, and then we'll use that player board as the parent. Now we can create our game board. That's equal to a new game board, and that just takes in a render grid. And then let's set empty equal to the game board dot get empty cell. So now we have access to the empty cell wherever that is, because it'll be in a random spot each time. Now we can do the same stuff for the pattern grid that we're trying to match up. So let pattern board be equal to document.get element by ID pattern board. Then let pattern grid be equal to a new render grid, passing in difficulty, and then these will only be 30 wide, and then we'll use the pattern board for the parent. Then we'll let the pattern board itself be equal to a new game board, and that will take in our pattern grid. Now we've done setting up all these variables. Now we can loop function, loop. Time will be passed in from our request animation frame. So request animation frame passes in a time, so in milliseconds from the first time you call the method. So we'll have one inside of here as well, so we can continue to call loop. First thing, let's set up the timer. So delta time plus equals time minus last time, which we know last time was set to 0 up here in line 137 for the first time. Then we set time, or last time, equal to time. That will continue to update delta time. So if delta time is greater than 1000, or 1 second is what it'll end up being, we'll reset delta time minus equal 1000, and then timer plus plus and seconds plus plus. Now underneath here we can do some formatting and stuff for our seconds. First we'll check if seconds is greater than 60, we want to reset seconds equal to 0. Then minutes will always be equal to timer divided by 60 floored. Okay, and then we'll set timer dom dot inner HTML equal to minutes is, if it's less than 10, we want to add a 0 to the beginning, plus minutes. This way we always, it looks like we have double digits always for our stuff. And then else, if it's greater than 10, we just set it equal to minutes. Plus, come on, plus seconds is less than 10. We will add a 0 to that as well, plus seconds. Else we just do seconds if it's over 10, so then we make sure we always have double digits. That's the point. Now we will do some rendering. We will say render the game board, then we'll render the render grid for player, then we will render the player board, or the pattern board, and the pattern grid. That should be all the rendering we need. Now let's check to see if we won. So first we're going to reset win to true, and then we'll do a check, and the check will reset it to false if we haven't won yet. So it looks like this: for let x equal 0, x is less than, and we'll just say pattern grid dot grid size, and then x plus plus. Let y, for let y equal 0, y is less than pattern grid dot grid size, y plus plus. If the game board dot cells at x and y, if the color attribute is not equal to the pattern grid or pattern board cells x, y color, forgot that there, if it's not equal to the color of the pattern board, then win is equal to false. So that means if any of the pieces that we're looping through are not the same color as the pattern board, then we must have lost, or we haven't won yet. And to make the win easy, we're just going to say if win is true, we'll console.log u won in, and we're going to concatenate the minutes plus the word minutes, so it'll say 4 minutes, and seconds plus the word seconds, so it'll say you won in so many minutes and seconds. Alright, else then we will request animation frame. That means that once you win, it'll stop looping through the request animation frame. You can't move anything, and you just won. There's not going to be any menus or anything in this game yet, because we're just trying to hurry through and create a game as fast as we can. Let's see what's going on so far. So seconds needs to have a D. Seconds. Where did I spell it wrong? Probably seconds here. And render is not a function with 2 R's. I accidentally renderer. There we are. So now you can see, oh, we also need delta time to be spelled correctly. No errors. You can see that we have a pattern grid up here that we want to check. Also, we need to concatenate, or sorry, we need to add between the seconds. Let's add a colon here. There, so now we have a colon between our minutes and seconds. We need this board to match this board, but right now we can't do anything, we can't move. So let's actually make it so that we can move stuff around. Document.onKeyDown is equal to function, passing in our event handler, and we'll do a switch case for all of the keys. So e.which, that will let us use our key codes to do what we want. So case 37 as a key code, which 37 I believe is one of the arrows. I think it's right arrow possibly. I'm not 100% sure. But we'll say gameboard.cells empty.x plus 1. So we're going to check to see if there is a cell to the right of our empty cell. If there is, then we're going to reset cell at empty.x and empty.y to a new cell, and it's going to take in render grid empty.x for the position, empty.y for the y position, and then we will actually take gameboard.cells at empty.x plus 1 and empty.y. We're going to grab the color of that piece and set it to whatever the empty piece was. So we're basically moving and swapping the pieces around. So gameboard.cells empty.x plus 1 and empty.y will be equal to a new cell, and it'll be render grid empty.x plus 1 empty.y, and false will be the color because that's going to be the new empty. Then empty.x plus plus. Now we're just going to increase the position of the empty cell manually. So let's copy this and do the same thing for 40, which will be, so I think 37, oh no, we want 39. 39 will be the opposite. So wherever there's pluses, we put minuses, and that will be completely fine for this case because it's the opposite. Any more pluses? Nope. Okay. Copy this one. We'll go down here for y, or for the up and down 40. So instead of x, we're going to do empty.y minus 1. Empty.y minus 1, and that same thing will happen for every spot that we had. The x will change to empty.y. And Y right here. Copy it, move it down for case 38, and then we'll just be doing the opposite. There'll be pluses here. Okay, let's see if we can move anything around. BG is not defined, 203. BG, where did I put BG instead of GB? It was at 203. GB. Now I gotta change it for all of these. Okay, close this down. We'll shrink this down. So now one of my keys is not working. Did I not change this to 38? $40 is not working. -1. We need to break these. Break. I did not put a break in. I don't know if that is the... Oops. Come on, just freaking scroll up. Invalid token 202. There it is. So now we can move this around, and we have to try to match the colors with the board above, and it will tell us what our time is. So I am not very great at it, but yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I can solve it in a reasonable amount of time. But you can see that it's working. We can move pieces around. Yeah, so it seems to be working pretty predictably. I just am not very good at it, so. Bam. There, I did it. There it goes. You won in 2 minutes and 7 seconds. And we can't move anything because the request animation frame stopped. So yeah, we built this game. We got it done in a half hour. Yeah, it looks like it's functioning. You guys do whatever you want. Make it look better. Make it behave better. Whatever. This was just a really quick attempt at making a game I saw in real life. It's kind of fun. Hope you guys enjoyed.